He was the man the world worshipped but could never truly touch. A legend carved in silence, a hero shaped by heartbreak. To millions, he was invincible, the immortal face of Hollywood. But in private, he was just a man on a park bench, feeding birds at sunrise, whispering to memories only he could hear. They called him a star. They called him a myth, but no title could hold the quiet ache behind his eyes. Before the memes, before the world romanticized his sadness, there was a man who had carried more loss than most hearts could bear. A love once held so deeply, it felt like destiny. Gone in a breath. A future he had touched in his dreams, taken before it ever began. A life fractured not by fame, but by fate. And when fate takes everything, it teaches one cruel lesson. Silence becomes safer than hope. So he lived quietly, worked humbly, spoke softly, a gentleman in a world that had forgotten gentleness, a man who didn't hide his pain. He simply refused to let it poison him. He walked through crowds unseen, sat in restaurants alone, nodded politely when kindness found him, smiled as though smiling did not sometimes hurt. Fame brought applause, but it could not bring company. Legacy brought reverence, but not warmth, and grief. Grief brought a kind of stillness that settled into his bones, teaching him to move slower, speak gentler, love from a distance, because loving close had once shattered him. The world thought he chose solitude, but solitude had chosen him first. He read books the way some people pray, seeking pieces of himself in the words of strangers. He walked long roads alone, not to escape others, but to remember who he was without them. He did not expect love again. Some heartbreaks do not bruise the heart, they freeze it. And his heart had stood in winter for years. But life has a quiet way of returning warmth when a soul has survived enough cold. It did not arrive with fireworks. It did not roar like Hollywood romance. It arrived the way dawn arrives, soft, gentle, asking nothing but space. And it wore silver hair that glimmered like moonlight. She did not step into his life to replace what was gone. She did not ask him to forget. She did not try to rescue him. She simply sat beside him in the quiet and made the silence feel safe again. Their connection began not in passion but in peace, not in urgency but in understanding. Two souls who had lived enough life to recognize that love is not always fire. Sometimes it is a blanket over tired shoulders, a quiet hand resting over trembling fingers saying only, "You don't have to carry this alone anymore." They met in moments without spectacle, a bookstore aisle, a shared smile, a conversation that valued whispers more than words. They did not chase each other. They gravitated, slowly, like two tired hearts remembering rhythm after years of beating only in survival. No headlines, no declarations, just presence, just calm, just the kind of companionship that feels less like falling in love and more like finally coming home. For a long time, he didn't call it love. He called it breathing again. And sometimes, that is all love is. The return of breath to a heart that learned to hold still. He never rushed toward her. He simply stopped walking away from life. Healing rarely announces itself. It doesn't knock loudly or burst into the room demanding to be felt. It creeps in quietly, softens the corners of long-held sadness, warms the spaces inside you that grief once froze solid. And so it happened, not in grand moments, but in the small ones. A shared cup of tea in a sunlit kitchen, laughter at something neither could properly explain, a knowing glance when silence had said enough, the gentle comfort of simply existing next to someone who understood the ache beneath the calm. She did not ask what he had lost. She never touched his wounds to measure their depth. She loved him without studying the ruins he came from, as though she knew the architecture of healing doesn't begin with rebuilding. It begins with resting. He found himself speaking slowly again, not the rushed words of one trying to fill a void, but the thoughtful sentences of a man remembering his own voice. They walked quiet streets together. He noticed birdsong again. She noticed the way he softened when he listened to the world. And somewhere between the quiet evenings and the soft mornings, they built a peace so gentle, he almost didn't realize he'd been missing it. There were moments when sadness returned. Grief doesn't leave. It learns to sit somewhere softer. On those days, she didn't cheer him up. She didn't drown him in encouragement. She simply sat with him, close enough for him to feel that even broken hearts still deserve company. When he talked about her, he didn't call her his savior. He didn't call her his miracle. He called her his calm. The world eventually noticed them, not because they stood loudly in the spotlight, but because they stood quietly together. She walked beside him without needing the world's attention. He held her hand like a man holding something he didn't think life would give him twice. There were photographs eventually, blurry, candid moments of two souls choosing peace. The internet buzzed. People argued. Some did not understand her silver hair. They didn't understand quiet strength, soft maturity, a love that arrives not to dazzle the world but to soothe a tired heart. But he understood, and for him, that was enough. The world has always mistaken noise for significance. But he had already lived through volumes of silence powerful enough to echo forever. He no longer hungered for grand gestures. He craved sincerity. And sincerity was the language she spoke fluently. They didn't rush. They didn't pose. They didn't perform. Their romance did not exist to be consumed. It existed to be felt, deeply, privately, honestly. She didn't ask to be the center of his world. She simply became a safe corner of it. A corner so warm that eventually he stopped returning to the cold. And slowly, the sadness that once lived behind his eyes began to fade. Not disappear. Grief never does. But fade just enough to make room for light again. He learned to laugh without guilt, to rest without fear, to hope without trembling, to love without bracing for loss. And one evening, in the golden hush between sunset and night as they sat together in a room filled with paint, books, and soft quiet, he looked at her the way survivors look at the sunrise, with gratitude too deep for words, not because she saved him, but because she reminded him he still deserved to feel alive. Sometimes love isn't a thunderstorm. Sometimes love is a warm lamp in a dark room, a steady flame that doesn't flicker, a soft voice whispering, "It's okay to stay." And in that gentle constancy, he found something stronger than passion. He found peace. There are moments in life when the world seems to hold its breath. Small, delicate, easily missed. Moments when the heart speaks softly enough that only the one meant to hear it will notice. Their love lived in those moments. They didn't need grand vows or sweeping declarations. They needed shared mornings, gentle touch, quiet dinners, soft sighs, and laughter that didn't echo loudly. It hummed like a familiar song. He began to see himself again, not as a man broken by grief, but as someone worthy of belonging, worthy of comfort, worthy of the kind of love that doesn't burn, but warms. She didn't erase the memory of what he lost. She honored it. She held space for it. She loved the parts of him that were still learning how to breathe again. And he cherished her not as a replacement for the past, but as a gift life offered him quietly, when he was finally ready to receive it. People often think healing arrives with applause, that redemption comes like a spotlight. But his came like a hand in the dark, a steady presence, a silver strand of hope in the hair of someone who did not try to save him, but simply stayed. They walked slowly through life, not because they feared time, but because they finally had no reason to rush. They had found the rarest thing in a world obsessed with noise, peace. And if you happened to pass them somewhere, a hidden cafe, a quiet street, a bookstore corner, You would not notice them at first. Two ordinary people in an extraordinary moment of stillness. A quiet smile, a gentle touch. A feeling between them so subtle, yet so powerful, it carried the weight of everything they once thought they had lost forever. He will always carry scars. She will always carry wisdom. And together, they carry something even more precious. A love that does not demand to be seen, only felt. The world remembers the image of him alone, a silent man with sadness in his eyes. But if you see him now, walking beside her, hands intertwined, shoulders touching in a quiet rhythm only they understand, you will see something almost sacred. Healing does not shout, it whispers. It does not arrive dressed in fireworks. It arrives wearing silver hair and speaking softly. It does not rescue, it rests beside you until you rise. He did not need someone to save him. He needed someone to stay, and in a life where pain once stole every tomorrow, love returned, gently, gracefully, to remind him that even the softest hearts deserve a second sunrise. He was never truly the lonely one. He was simply waiting for someone who understood that love isn't always fire and thunder. Sometimes love is peace. And peace, when found late, is the most beautiful love of all. Because the greatest battles are not fought in explosions of glory. They are fought in silence, in memory, in the quiet chambers of the heart. And the greatest heroes are not the ones who save the world, but the ones who learn somehow, after everything, to feel again. He lost everything, until love returned in silver hair. And this time, he didn't just survive life. He lived.